Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Raising Vibrations. And we're going to be doing the full moon in Gemini. And this is for the 23rd of November 2018. Hope that you're all well. Wow, what an incredible experience this has been. I'm sure you yourself have been going through some tremendous amount of changes. These shifts have definitely been intense. And hopefully today I can share some of my thoughts, and as well as what myself and Jen have actually grounded in our own understanding of the chart. And let's see if we can, provide some context as to what has actually been taking place for us. So, of course, there's loads to actually talk about as usual. And let me just make sure that I got my chart running over there. Okay. I think the first thing that I want to sort of look straight at is, we've got this interesting dynamic of Mercury retrograde at 10 degrees. We've got Jupiter sitting at Sag at 3. We've got the Sun, of course, at 0 degrees Sagittarius, right? So we've got this huge connection of planetary energies sitting in the middle of Sagittarius, okay, or in the beginning phase and middle of Sagittarius. And of course, this sort of represents to us the context of a new cycle regarding an energy archetype, i.e. Sag, right? You can see clearly here that there's a lot of focus on the Sagittarius energy. Although with Mars being in Pisces and Mars squaring the Sun, Mars squaring Jupiter, and of course the Mercury retrograde, this is not an energy that reflects, oh, okay, like we're just about to jump into this and let's just go into this direction. In fact, this is a lot about culminating stuff, a lot about, finishing off and completing things. And to me, I think this has a big, significant influence to this recent Venus retrograde that we've just gone through. Okay. But yeah, so Mercury, retrograde, 10 degrees Sagittarius, got Mars sitting at 4 degrees Pisces, and then of course the moon sitting at 0 degrees Gemini. And this is actually making this T-square, right? T-square energy in mutable signs. And it's one fire sign, one water sign, and one air sign. Now, when you look at the T-square between Sag, Pisces, and Gemini, what it's reflecting to us here is the nature of how we identify things in the phenomena of reality and how we then relate to those things according to a personal belief or a cosmology or a sense of intuitive understanding. Okay, so the intuitive understanding is a Sagittarius function. It's the right brain, okay? And we have Gemini sitting with the left brain, okay? And this is this left-right brain combination. And then Pisces will reflect the totality of the entire structure. Not insight, though, okay? Insight is the Uranian field that exists when the electricity between the left and right brain actually create a connection, right? But here we have this Pisces energy, and that is the totality of all of it. It's the awareness that materializes when both of those components are in function together. So within the experience of our awareness interacting with Sag, Pisces, and Gemini, the way that we identify stuff, Gemini, and how that allows us to orientate with reality, Pisces, right, that is non-physical in the sense that anything that is identified is immediately in duality, right? Because we separate it from its original origin. So when we look at the Sag T-square over here, the context of the energy is reflecting a process of identifying things, okay? Identifying within yourself the duality of the current reality, right? And we're observing a contrast experience. And in the contrast, there's one relationship to an experience in our lives or to a cycle in our lives. And then there's a contrast to another cycle in our lives. And one is reflecting the culmination and the totality of what that represented to us and the meaning of that. And the other one represents how we are open to the abyss that is reflecting, saying, we don't really know what it is that is there, okay? So just with that T-square over there, there's this huge energetic shift around the way that we are shifting from one cycle of understanding to another. And what does that feel like emotionally when one of them has a letting go essence to it and the other one has I'm not sure what the next step is, but that's okay because I'm not really needing to be in line with what that next step is because it's not materialized yet. It's just kind of, we're just sensing it. So in our article that myself and Jen wrote, we talk about this T-square as the sensing, right? The intuitive sense. And it is literally that, right? Right now, your senses, your intuitive senses are to be heightened, okay? You're needing to interact with reality in a way that has this very right brain abstract essence to it. And when you look at Mercury through the lens of evolutionary astrology, when Mercury goes retrograde, okay, Mercury will immediately act in a function of dumping all of the information that you have been gathering and processing at a conscious mental level into the right brain. Okay, so it's like literally that. It will be taking all of the stuff that you've been gathering, processing, and it will put it into the right brain aspect. And from that place, we'll have intuitive guidance and understanding and reflection. Now, what does that mean in terms of the cycle? It's actually pretty clear. You know, when we're talking about the Sagittarius archetype and we're talking about the right brain function, it's not a coincidence that Mercury is retrograde, conjunct Jupiter, and both of these planets are, even though Mercury is retrograde, moving backwards, right, it is still in a new phase conjunction to Jupiter, meaning that the context of our way in which we relate to ourselves intellectually, and then through that, the nature of how our philosophy begins to form based on the opinions and facts and information that we gather, that is still in a new like orientation. And whenever we're experiencing something that's new, whenever we're jumping into something that we've never done before, there's an element of discovery, and there's an element of anxiety, and there's an element of the unknown, which is sort of contributing a lot to our feelings of how the past has now just kind of moved through us with this Venus retrograde, but also how, as this culminative energy of the Venus retrograde is moving through us and we're kind of just making sense of what it's about, and okay, that relationship meant that, and this cycle meant that, and I don't need those values anymore. As you kind of cut away from that, Mercury jumping all of them into the right brain, we're developing this intuitive sense that is essentially the framework and groundwork for what the next step in our evolutionary growth will be about. And for every one of you, I'm sure if you really, really connect to your inner space and you see what your journey is about, you'll notice that there is this open space of, where is everything going? What is my next step? Or what am I doing at this point in time? Now, the other side of this experience, of course, is feeling complete lostness, and this has a lot to do with Uranus. So I'm going to be shifting my attention over now to Uranus, and Uranus sitting at 29 degrees Aries, right? Retrograde motion. And Uranus is squaring the South Node, of course, in Capricorn, and the North Node in Cancer, right? Now, just for the sake of understanding what these symbols mean, okay, firstly, we're going to layer it like this. We're going to see them as cardinal signs, right? Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, they're cardinal. So this is change, right? Initiation of change. Whereas the mutable signs of Pisces, Sagittarius, and Gemini, they are reflecting an expansion of something while a mutative energy is taking place. So think of cardinal energy as the seed that wants to break through the ground, right? Burst of energy. Whereas the mutative energy of the signs of Sagittarius, Gemini, and Pisces, and of course Virgo, but it's not integrated here. This is like the branches of a tree that are expanding out to gain more space. So there is expansive energy while at the same time changing energy, right? And this is obviously another huge contributing factor to why there is a feeling of change taking place within ourselves. And it's because of the Uranian energy interfacing with the nodal axis, right? So here we have this nodal axis sitting at 28 degrees. We've got Uranus sitting here in Aries at 29 retrograde. And Uranus is also making an inconjunct to the Sun and to Jupiter and Mercury as well. Particularly the Sun and Jupiter being the most prevalent in this situation. Now, when we deal with inconjuncts, what we're dealing with is a phasal relationship between two planets in which there is a adjustment period that needs to take place, and it naturally manifests through crisis. Okay, so the Uranian component is interfacing with Jupiter and the Sun, and it's saying, I'm going to create sudden shocks of mutative change that you're not going to see coming, that are going to materialize as a potential crisis, and this potential crisis will essentially shock your attention into a new direction, right? And so this is aiding this evolutionary process in which, as we're dumping things from the left brain to the right brain, i.e. cognitive, logical awareness, into this abstract peripheral sense, we're also then having this sudden out of the blue changes occur for us that manipulate our perception into something that's new, right? And this is, of course, influencing a huge part of the way that we are relating to ourselves and to life at this point in time. So that inconjunct is playing a big role within the context of the symbolism over here. Now, the only thing that Uranus is doing at the moment in a sense of a trine is to Saturn. Now, Uranus itself trining Saturn, planetary ruler of your south node being Saturn, you can see that there's another direct influence here around the Uranian component. And you must remember, guys, that when at least I'm talking about Uranus within the context of a frequency or a energy archetype, we're talking about something that exists in a nonlinear pattern. So the way in which Uranian energy will influence personal planets like Saturn, like Jupiter as an example, will have can potentially have some really traumatic experiences. And it's because the emotional identity, in other words, how you emotionally relate to each moment and the security that you feel as you're going along in a sequential way, right, can be affected by a sudden change in patterning that leads to an uncertainty or why is this happening, type of dynamic. So it's important to note that if there are sudden changes that are taking place within your kind of pathway, to just embrace them as something that is illuminating, which the ego cannot perceive or see. Okay, right? Same thing. Now, what is Uranus actually doing in the context of the symbolism? Well, it is doing exactly that. It's trying to shake up the context of how the previous belief systems and ideologies and perspectives you've used to essentially validate the nature of your reality, right? And this is a big thing to understand. And I encourage everybody that is listening to this video right now to pause and digest these sort of messages in sections, because what I'm saying about Uranus essentially trying to shake up the context of our cosmology, our belief systems, it's essential to understand that if we are perceiving life through the same lens of when Jupiter was in Sagittarius the last time, then what is happening is that we're consistently looking at a problem within our reality through a lens that has essentially got outdated software. So Uranus comes along and says, okay, now there's a software update, right? How many of you own an Apple phone or a Samsung or any form of technology, and you'll know at some point, or an app that you've got on your phone, and you'll notice that the phone will say, hey, by the way, you've got to get updates, right? And this is the same thing. Things are constantly evolving. And so updated, refreshed ways of technology, or our hard drive, in other words, our own personal sense of conscious awareness, needs to be updated as well. So this is what's happening, right? And you'll notice that the solutions to problems that you're dealing with at this point in time, personally and collectively, will be linked with how we are essentially breaking out of these belief patterns that may be limiting. Okay. Now, this is called riding the wave. And we wrote about it in the article in a way that gave the impression that when you observe a surfer, right, somebody that's surfing, you'll notice that when they're lying on the board waiting for a wave to come, they're in a deep intuitive sort of sense of feeling into the currents. And I think that this is like really, really crucial to understand. You know, I was asking Jen just before this video, what was that insight that I wanted to share on the stream? And we couldn't remember it, but it's just beautifully landed in my awareness right now. And it goes along the lines of this. You know, it's really, really important to understand that right now we need to embrace each collective shift as an evolutionary progression versus something that is destabilizing us, or which on certain experiences it is, and it's, you know, happening for a specific reason, not one that is linked with our ego understanding of what that is about. It's beyond that. But within the context of these shifts, there are necessary changes within our DNA, and there are necessary changes within the way in which we relate to life, because we're not in a stagnant sort of ball that's just existing, right? The creative principle that is life and the archetypal expression that is existence is constantly in motion. And so what we're reading here is literally just a play-by-play of where those archetypes are pulling the strings and reflecting beautiful notes and harmonies in specific areas, and where there are certain tensions regarding experiential growth. And so because we are a physical form and we have this physical vessel, we're ultimately embodying the nature of these experiences because they interface with our own time. In other words, we all have our own unique space-time experience, and our natal chart is a reflection of that. Now, when you experience these dynamics over here, it is simply just our sense interfacing with these timings, but it is also a mutative pulse. That's how we grow. So if we embrace these dynamics, you'll see that the current space that we're right now is that we've been going through a tremendous amount of, you know, like Jen said, going through the birth canal, coming out and being like, okay, interesting place. Or literally going through this intense storm and now coming out the other side and the water is calm. And if you see it as if we've been shipwrecked, or if you see it as if we've just been sort of obliterated by something and we've lost everything, then the emotional relationship to the experience is going to feel like hopelessness or meaninglessness. Whereas if we see it as these shifts are bringing us to the exact places in which a higher expression of creative evolution is, you know, moving through us, then we're actually exactly where we are and where we need to be. And all we need to do is just do exactly what the surfer is doing, which is waiting on his board for when he can feel the undercurrent of a wave coming, which is commonly known as a swell, and then catching the wave. And the difference is that with that Mars in Pisces approaching Neptune, right, we can either feel complete confusion, lostness, an absolute sense of hysteria, everything's gone nuts, or we can actually align ourselves with what it's like to feel riding the wave, where you experience 0 point gravity within the actual wave itself, and you're in the tube and you're experiencing that whole entire process of being one with God, which is, there's no mental process. It is simply intuitive, and the wave is taking you in a direction, and you're not needing to do anything other than literally just keep your balance, right? And allow yourself to experience that sensation. And these are all beautiful ways in which you can see this Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, you know, Sagittarius squaring the Pisces archetypes dynamic. So, you know, this is about being sensitive to the next phases of evolutionary changes, and recognizing when the wave is not there, then we're nothing to ride, essentially, you know. So clarity will, in my opinion, arrive around the 6th, 7th of December 2018. And the reason why I say that is because, of course, Mercury will go direct. I think we'll have Venus in Scorpio at that time. And we'll also have Mars conjuncting Neptune, right? Mars and Neptune will be in a new phase conjunction. So everything up until now with regards to Mars is all completion. and we're completing cycles, we're understanding deeper insights, and this has a lot to do with our intuitive wisdom that is maturing. And then, of course, when Venus does actually move into Scorpio and it aligns with the Mercury direct function and Mars goes, over Neptune, this is when this next phase will eventually become clear to us. This whole entire essence of what we've been doing will have perspective. And it's not a coincidence, again, that Neptune will go direct in 2 days' time. And when Neptune goes direct, just like Jen was talking about, actually, when it goes retrograde, they'll have this intense amount of fogginess. And then we'll experience a retrograde process. And consistently, as we go through the phase of retrograde, clarity and clarity and clarity will arrive until eventually the point in which the most amount of clarity can exist, paradoxically, the most amount of confusion that could also exist, is where Neptune is either stationary, direct, or retrograde. Okay, so this essence of Neptune going direct, in 2 days' time, is an indicator again that we're about to experience new cycles of imagination, new cycles of inspiration, and of course those will all be aligned with the new values that we've been, working through with Venus retrograde. And of course, Mercury direct will give us that opportunity to begin absorbing new information relative to a purpose that actually is in alignment with where we are right now, right? So some really big changes in the context of that symbolism over there. And this is the key for this at this point in time, is just allowing ourselves to surrender to what is culminating at this stage and be open to the abyss at the moment without the need to identify it as anything other than literally that, just this openness, this field, infinite potential and possibility, but nothing at this point in time needing to be solely acted on, simply just to be embraced. Okay. So I've got something really exciting that I want to talk about as well, and I hope that everybody got a lot out of this video today. And I'm just going to click on my screen over there so that I can actually have this. Just give with me a second. Where are you? Okay. There we go. So what you see on the screen right now is the chart at the moment. And then over here, which I don't know if it's too clear on the screen. I will try to see if I can find better ways to get the planetary nodes up. I might actually create a chart individually. But here where my cursor is at the moment, I might actually, if you bear with me for a second, everybody, I'll get a pointer for us. There we go. I've got the planetary nodes of each of the planets at the moment, apart from, of course, their personal planets because they move too fast. But I've got planetary nodes up at the moment, okay? And it's just a brief introduction around what the planetary nodes are. Think of it like this, okay? Every single planet that exists in the natal chart has a history, an evolutionary trajectory, okay? And so every single planet has a trajectory relative to where it is coming from and where it is in the moment, which is of course where we see it right now, and its evolutionary purpose going forward, okay? This is this law of Trinity. So when we integrate the planetary nodes into the current cosmological context, and this is a very deep layer, and again, I'm going to go through this very slowly with you, and this is not going to be a sort of deep conversation around planetary nodes. I'll begin to integrate this into my work more and more, because I feel like it's cool to know, and I suppose on some level it allows us to access even deeper layers of the astrology, and that's definitely what my trip's about, especially in this astrology channel. Okay, so the planetary nodes, each of them represent an aspect of an archetype that has history. And so when we access the consciousness of that archetype, we can see what is essentially, what is the conditioning field, okay? Now, let me break down the word conditioning field and what I mean by this specifically. When I talk about the conditioning field, I'm talking about the collective's relationship to how it perceives reality at a universal level, okay? So we can all validate for ourselves that within the whole entire globe, every single person, every single culture, has a specific religion, whether it be a religion that is of an existential being, or a religion that is correlating to your own unique version of what you perceive the truth to be. And within the context of one being completely sovereign and the other one being completely collective in its sense, or allowing the authority to be dictated by something existential, there is the whole entire spectrum of where people's beliefs fall into that, atheism and so on and so forth. Now, what this means is that when we're talking about a conditioning field, we're talking about the conditioning field of Jupiter, right? Within our human awareness, there is the context of belief. There is the context of what we use to organize and arrange the nature of reality. So when we go around the chart and we look at things like Saturn, for instance, what we have here is the way in which we organize reality through a linear form. What are the laws? What are the rules, regulations? And how do we define boundaries? Okay. So here we have Saturn and of course Pluto. Same thing, collectives, desire, nature, and what has been evolving us and so on. Now on the chart, you can actually see here right at the corner, I've touched on this in a previous video, and I'm going to touch on this again, and I'm going to keep just kind of processing my own story at the moment, because at some point I really want to bring this material through for you guys to begin understanding and helping you process what is actually going on within the world at this stage, because these planetary conditioning fields go beyond the scope of just the natal chart. Okay, so imagine that you have literally just discovered your sun sign. For everybody that has, studied astrology or came into awareness of astrology, remember the first time you discovered your sun sign and you were like, oh, wow, okay, I'm sun in Scorpio, and you began to, read what that was about, and you started to discover and you started to attribute certain characteristics and so on and so forth. Well, think of the moment of that discovery and now keep on amplifying it until eventually you become aware of the context of planetary nodes. So you become aware of your sun sign, and then you go a little bit deeper, and then you become aware of your ascendant. And as you do this, you kind of just open up more until you really fully grasp, okay? So when we're talking about the planetary nodes over here, I'm talking about a vast expansion of awareness around this. And I get that, most of us still need to kind of just sit with Pluto at the moment, and that's okay because we're not going too far on that. Pardon me, I just want to get some water. We're not going too far on that, but you can understand the relationship between the planetary nodes conditioning field that it reflects to us thousands of years of civilization, and the sun sign, which is simply just, oh, wow, cool. Sun in Scorpio as an example. I have this character trait. Or the first time you discovered somebody talking about your sun sign on a YouTube video. So when we look at these planetary nodes and we begin to investigate them, where I'm at is what is the underlying subconscious and unconscious patterning that permeates through into our awareness that then looks like what we see the reality to be. Okay, so when you see my little marker over here, and we've got the south node of Chiron. Okay, and currently at the moment here we have Uranus transiting the south node of Chiron. Okay, now Uranus in itself represents the subconscious or the individuated subconscious. All right, this is the arena of awareness that gets activated through hypnotherapy, through things like past life regression, and will probably contain 90% of all of the soul's memories within the body awareness. Okay, Uranus. Now, because Uranus will reflect the subconscious, repressed emotional and psychological reality that we haven't been able to process through Saturn, when Chiron South Node gets transited by Uranus, you can begin to sort of thread together a little bit about what is actually going to manifest for itself. And so the materialization of these two symbols over here is going to bring up to us, all of us at this point in time, like very, very, very strong memories and some really, really deep, displaced and unprocessed collective trauma that has a direct correlation to where abuse of our boundaries, the violations of trust, regarding what is our sense of natural free will, and how we have experienced the imbalance regarding things like dominating cultures. So cultures that have conquered other countries and dominated them through war and aggression. We just need to look at our emotional relationship to displaced anger and emotion that's pocketing all over the place, or pocketing up all over the place right now, regarding segregation and the alienation of the races, and how religion has, through its sort of duality, separated human beings that look, that are essentially coming from the same source, but will perceive themselves differently. Okay, so where we have things like repressed emotional complexes around gender role assignments, and what types of bad feelings and different perspectives, and how we as a collective race relate to these experiences of the right. If you vote for these people, then their values are better. If you vote for those people, those values are better. And that because you are left and you are right, or because you are black and I am white, or because you are Asian and I am what else, Mexican or something like that, then we have collective trauma in the way that we relate to ourselves. And because of that being the case, I'm not going to see you in your heart space. I'm going to see you as the definition of your skin color, and how we've been programmed to essentially respond to things that we don't know or feel unknown to. So right now, in covering a very small aspect of the deep subconscious iceberg that exists within the alignment of Uranus and the south node of Chiron, is what I've just shared right now. It's not a coincidence that we're dealing with a lot of violence pertaining to people that will look at the world and go, what's the point of living? And I'm angry with you, and so therefore I'm going to take my anger and frustration out on you and kill myself at the same time. This is a tremendous amount of charged energy that exists there. And the fact that Chiron and the south node of Chiron is squaring the nodal axis at the moment, i.e. the transiting nodes in Cancer Capricorn, with Uranus there as well, it's showing up within our communities, it's showing up within the structure and the forms of the way in which we perceive the paradigm of reality at this stage. So within the context of this full moon in Gemini, and with all of these sort of new and full moons that are taking place, they are evolving these deeper undercurrents that take a lot longer to essentially manifest and materialize. Okay. So when you're looking at life right now and you're seeing the injustice, you're seeing all you need to do is just sit on watch the news, for instance, and you'll see where there's constant persecution around certain beliefs and ideologies, perspectives, race, etc., etc. You can see it's all over the world, and it's pretty intense. And a lot of us shut down from that because the electrical charge that exists within our, in our form, in our emotional field, is intense. And we don't know what to do with ourselves when that emotion floods to the surface, and pretty much all of the time it's going to be anger. We don't know what to do with that displaced anger. So with Venus at the moment, retrograding over the north node of Chiron, a lot of us would have noticed that during this period of time, during Venus retrograde, we were looking at violations of abuse, displaced anger, where we felt like our own personal boundaries were not honored. We felt where there was disempowerment or imbalance regarding things. And so right at the moment, we're working through some really, 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 really heavy stuff. And it's not to be taken lightly. I feel like there is an absolute essential need for compassion towards yourself and towards the world at this stage. And I don't mean forgiveness of things that you feel are abusive to yourself. I'm just asking you to be very, very sensitive to how you can relate to your triggers, and how those triggers go beyond what the mind can be perceiving in the moment. And when these triggers show up, to allow yourself the space and freedom to process the nature of what they represent to you, because each of us are going to have a specific relationship to these triggers. And of course, it's important to know as well that while you're actually tending to these emotional triggers and giving yourself this freedom and compassion to really, honor what has taken place, allow yourself to see that these things need to show up in order for us to not only transmute, but for us to see the awareness of how we can not go down the same road again, right? And for us to also recognize what is essentially healing for us during this time of huge change, and what it supports in terms of how we would wish to continue building the new paradigm. Because ironically, this at the moment is also stimulating a lot of reasons as to why we would choose a new direction. Uranus on the South Node, Uranus retrograde in Aries, choosing a new direction, right? Relative to these subconscious traumas and memories, okay? So there's a lot to talk about at this point in time, but just, looking at the nature of the repression of feminine principles, the anger that exists there, men that feel like it's not okay to express your feelings or emotions because you're vulnerable, you'll be perceived as weak, all of the social conditioning that's associated with us essentially feeling out of touch with ourselves at a more deeper spiritual level, and seeing what that means to us, and how it's an important process for us to get in contact with those deeper sensitivities within inside of ourselves, and how that disconnect essentially has left us to feel isolated or separated, and that we can't really see from the heart, but we see from the trigger or the trauma that is flooding our electrical system. Okay, so it's important to really watch this process for you at this point in time, especially because of the nature of Uranus being over there. It's a collective symbolism, and it has a lot to do to the contribution of why things look pretty much insane at the moment in terms of, just randomness and just complete. When I talk about randomness, I mean things that don't make sense, where you can see that there's clear distortion and pain and suffering that has occurred, and that the ego is damaged there, and how there are people that are afraid, and there are people that are really truly trying to make sense of things. And this is one of the big contributing factors to why that be the case. Okay, so I'm going to just pause the sort of conversation for a second and just go back to this chart over here, and just kind of open up the conversation to the YouTube chat and Patreon. I want to see if everybody if we've got some conversation on Patreon. If we don't, if any of you that are on the YouTube chat at the moment that are Patreon members, make sure that you are writing your questions. I'd be happy to respond to them. If there isn't, I'd happy to respond to anybody that's got some questions on just the normal chat. Okay. So how is everybody doing during this full moon, by the way? Let me just access. Okay. So let's have a look in the chat if anybody... people are doing lots of sleeping. Yep, that's definitely true. Neptune rules the pineal gland of the sixth sense. That is correct. Key of life. Yes, that's right. Just in case. Beam me up, Scotty. Julie's saying hi, Jennifer. Germany's got Jupiter, Sagittarius, 4th house. Are you planning on moving anytime soon, Jeremy? We've got Annalou from Sweden. Hello, greetings. Yes, very cold over here at the moment. Hi from Australia. Okay. Andrea, on sleeping, reviewing my Venus retrograde from 2010. Liberata Menta, I got many discussions with my partner on the full moon. I slept heaps too. very sleepy at peace. Yeah, that's right. Some of us are fighting back against the PC. Hi from Serbia. Okay. That doesn't seem to... All right. So like I said, I'm happy to respond to a couple of questions. I don't see anybody in Patreon at the moment. For anybody that is a Patreon, I'm going to press the refresh button here to see if that's the case. If you've got any questions. Okay. Nightcat, you're asking, can you talk about Neptune going direct? Will it get foggier or clearer for us? Well, my feeling towards it is that, yeah, you know, Neptune going direct will, in my opinion, be Neptune stationary direct will be a place of clarity, absolutely, and you'll have clarity regarding what the last cycle is about specifically, and insights and a sense of understanding. But then, of course, as it begins to move forward again, we'll begin to interact with it in a way just like we would do with previous cycles. So there is a duality around, or a sense of clarity in understanding the dynamics of what has come before its retrograde stationary moving forward. And we'll begin to integrate those insights into our life so that there can be, you know, awakening effect. But as we also do that with Neptune going direct, there is the potential to become hooked on new dreamscapes. Okay. So it's not, I mean, Neptune through Pisces in and of itself is going to be a process of going through cycles of disillusionment and then clarity, and disillusionment and clarity anyway. So we've pretty much got that up until, what, another 5 years or something. Okay, born under a lot of these transits, Sag, Gemini, full moon, retro, so loving it. Awesome, happy to hear that. When will Uranus aspect change for the US? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I'm not as clued up on that astrology, but I'm sure that anybody that's watching this video that is able to get that information and help somebody in the chat, that would be great. Uranus in 2024, is that when Uranus moves into Gemini? What's it now? It's 4 years plus 2018, so it's about 7-year transits. So 2004, 2024, 2025. I'm not 100% sure on that. Okay. So I'll keep on refreshing Patreon at the moment, and while I'm waiting for that, if there's anybody that wants to ask a question, I'd be happy to respond to that in the chat itself. Star Young, you're writing, my moon is in Gemini. Can you give me some insights? Sure. I'm just joining, please. Okay. Well, what is it specifically? The Virgo part of the Virgo education in me wants to ask the question: what specifically you want some information on regarding your Gemini moon? Fernanda, thanks very much. I appreciate that a lot, and also a lot of the insights that comes through in this conversation today is from Jen as well. You know, she contributes a lot to what I share. It's just my way of articulating insights that arrive in the moment. Okay, so just checking the chats. Gemini, Sun, Mercury, and Ascendant popping in. Roberts. And let's have a look. How does the moon affect me, or does it affect me personally or than others, I guess? Well, I mean, this full moon itself actually landed on my natal Chiron, which sits at 1 degrees Gemini. And of course, Chiron to me plays a really important role in my chart because it's planetary ruler is not only conjunct Pluto, and it's also in conjunct my Uranus at the same time. And Mercury is ruling my skip steps too. So, you know, yeah, if you have personal planets over there, then it will affect you a great deal. And the question you want to ask yourself is, what is taking place in my life right now, and how is my emotional relationship to what is taking place reflecting to me that path? You know, how am I relating to life, and then how is my emotional relationship to what I'm relating to revealing to me my own personal karma? And so the transits will highlight that for you, right? So whenever you've got transits and when you've got new and full moons happening, you want to be recognizing how you are how you're feeling emotionally in with regards to that transit. Okay, so let me put the chat box up over here so that I can actually see everybody. Virgo rising, sun sign Libra. My MC is Gemini 22 degrees. What does that mean? Like I said again, guys, when you've got transits that are affecting your planet itself, you've got to ask yourself the question: how am I interfacing with reality at this point in time? You know, that's why, honestly, this is not a plug, but it is something that I think is essential for everybody to understand, is that, you know, when you start to access the nature of your existence of life through the lens of EA, and you ask yourself the question, why am I here? That's when transits will begin to make sense to you, because you'll start to understand that there is a specific story and a script that you're here to experience. And so how are you authoring this experience? And the transits give you the pens and the colors and the tools and the platform for you to see what you're going to author. So when you look at when you're surfing on the internet and you're looking at astrology, you know, descriptions and stuff, it gives you a specific way to relate to yourself. But really what you want to be doing is you want to ask yourself the question, what is my specific story about? And the only way you can do that is really getting an astrology reading. It's something that you should invest in, because if it takes you like 6 months to save up, or a year, or whatever, do it, because it gives you the opportunity to really relate to your life. And then when transits come along, you go, okay, here's my story, and this transit's going to do this right now within the context of that story, you know? So in order to answer questions around transits, you need to be able to know how you can relate it back to yourself. And without that thing there, it's just information that you can't actually ground into your physical form, you know? Like this new moon that lands on my Chiron, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. But if I were to say, for instance, it's, you know, duality, it wouldn't make sense to me, because the context of my own personal story needs to be aligned with what that symbolism is about, so that I actually get the actual reality versus just, like I said again, what we could perceive it to be. I don't actually know how to pronounce your name, Tizan. My website has the ability to raising-vibrations.com, www.raising vibrations.com. You know, that's how you can book a reading. But I'm just saying in general, you know, even if it doesn't, you know, just with somebody that you can get. The point is to get a relationship to your chart. That's the first step. The step is, how do I form a relationship with my chart? And then from then onwards, I can actually begin to answer my own questions around what the transits are, you know, because I can relate to those experiences in the moment and how that's going through. And that's one of my biggest missions, is to really help people recognize that when we get connected with that inner story and that inner dialogue, then we can use astrology to see the path illuminate for us, you know. Anxiety is off the charts at this point in time. Yes, a lot of the reason why that anxiety will take place is new direction, new experiences. The ego is trying to attach to something which there isn't anything there. So, you know, go on the internet and, you know, look through some videos, people that can help you deal with anxiety, you know, breath exercises and so on and so forth. So Julie Lynn, what are the top 3 to 5 things to look at with transits? I would definitely look at your Pluto transit, because that is obviously where the deepest unconscious material is going to be evolving for you. I would look at your nodes to see where in what theater are you in. You know, are you dealing with life through the 7th house, 1st house dynamic? So your south and north nodes, the transiting nodes, where they're landing in your astrology chart, which houses. And of course, where Pluto is transiting. And then, of course, looking where the sun moves, you know. Moving through the sun, or where the sun is moving through the house, will give you an indication of what you're going to be perceiving for that month. Okay. So I felt tired, my body's manifesting rash on my skin, like allergy. I'm experiencing situations that are moving deep into fibers. Which of the angles is most important for Pluto? I'm not really understanding your question, and it's probably just because of my own uncertainty with my open ajna. But when you talk about angles, you're talking about like transiting the 7th house or 1st house or 10th house. I would say wherever Pluto is in your chart, I would just look at. I mean, all of them are going to reflect importance. Absolutely, we shouldn't in any way whatsoever give any sort of preference to which one, because they'll all be intense. Right. Okay. So conjunctions, oppositions, etc. Right. So when I would definitely say conjunctions to planets, definitely oppositions, completely, squares, trines. I mean, any relationship to Pluto, you're definitely going to be knowing about it. That's why I was saying Pluto in itself, wherever it is, study it deeply, and will give a tremendous amount of understanding. Okay, peeps. I've got a little bit more time left just to answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If that's good with yourself. I think we've been on, I'm not actually entirely sure how long we've been on for this call, but probably just under an hour. Let's have a look. Yeah, 52 minutes. So I'll stick around for a couple of more questions, and then I think I'm going to call it a day. Okay, Nightcats, you're saying, what does the 5th house represent on a deeper level? Because transit Pluto conjuncts natal Neptune and Uranus in the 5th. It's a good question. Actually, it was answered. It was a really, really good description was given today. Jen was talking about it, and it's about, you know, to me, the 5th house is about attention. This is the part where the child develops their sense of awareness about themselves. And because the 5th house is so much about the me archetype, this is attention to ourselves, right? How do we give credit and attention to what we are, and how do we see ourselves through the lens of us, as in me? This is me. You know, the deeper layer of this archetype is how we develop a sense of creative purpose. You know, what is the purpose and meaning of my life, and what is the purpose that I have to fulfill through this? What is my destiny? So when you've got Pluto transiting your 5th house, this is the time in which you either recreate yourself through the context of self-actualization, you know, empowered purpose and meaning, or it means a time in which you can actually experience, you experience the sort of stagnant psychological and emotional complexes that are rooted in disempowerment around how you actually validate your existence. You know, give it meaning, give it purpose, give it the sense of specialness that is you, essentially, and how you give attention to that. Okay. So Virgo and Leo rising, thanks for the answer, Uranus answer. I'm sure if it was me, I'm glad. If it was somebody else, thanks very much for helping. Okay. All right, peeps, I think I'm going to end it today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope that you got a lot out of this, and we will definitely be, chatting to you more in the time to come. And have a wonderful weekend and Thanksgiving. I think it's in the States, if I'm not mistaken. So just be safe during this period of time. And like I said, we'll speak to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.